Hello, this is the Game Philosopher, and today I would like to talk more about the Eastern Roman Empire. So I already talked about Vasilakis and his rhetorical exercises, and today I would actually like to skip ahead a few centuries in Eastern Roman thought. Maybe uh, you might like this video. It's a lot of people talk about Saint Gregory Palamas. I don't want to talk about him right now. I'll talk about him in a future video. But I'll talk about a guy in this video, which I think you will like. His name is Theodore Metochites. And this gentleman actually knew Palamas, by the way. He actually was there with the emperor to test his knowledge on Aristotle, which was a great help. I think it's similar to how um, modern PhDs have chairs uh, where people would share other people's dissertations, and it just shows how impressive and important Orthodox philosophy was, and how uh, back in the past, orthodoxy and philosophy actually mixed pretty well. Now there are people who would disagree with me on that today, especially using St. Gregory Palamas, but I'll get to that in a different video. We're talking about Mitohites now. So, when you're talking about classical education, there has to be a use for it. And in fact, um, Mitohites, he's disputing with people on the utility of education, and throughout his book, he's attacking people for trying to attack education as if it were a worthless thing. And a lot of it comes into this normative ethics system which he establishes, which I will not get into much talk about because I think that's important itself, but I really want to focus on the educational aspect of his treatise. So, um, his idea, and he compares it to a boat that goes about in life, that education has the duty to guide us. And he even talks about how these old philosophers that came before us, Socrates, for example, or you could also say Zeno of Citium, Proclus, Aristotle, all those guys, how they wrote books to guide us through our lives, and as they guide us through our lives, they teach us very practical and useful information which we apply our lives to. And this is nothing new because Seneca, many years before Mitohites, he actually wrote about the important self-help nature of philosophy, and yet Mitohites is looking at it from an educational standpoint. So when we're looking at education, we're not only looking at stuff like that, but um, Mitohites even takes it a step further. Not only should we read the classics, the great philosophers of the past, and use their advice in our lives, we should affirm um, the proper uh, theological principles of religion, which we cannot really question ourselves too much without falling into heresy if we profess to be a Christian, or if you're a Muslim. I guess you would not question too much on Islamic thinking. And this is something that's a little odd for modern thinkers because we're used to Enlightenment type thinking. We are always very skeptical, especially on religion, because we are pretty much humanist today. It was not this way for Mitohites, so you pretty much accept the dogma, and as much as you can, you avoid talking about things that are very ordinary because you don't want to become a heretic. And heresy, by the way, uh, is defined by many philosophers differently, but Damascusine, one of my favorite Christian philosophers, defines it in a way I think could help understand this concept that the philosophers who are heretics are the ones that are saying stuff that is agreed by some but not all. So, for example, if someone denies that wind exists, he's a heretic because not all people agree with him. Now, heresy is not necessarily a bad thing, although a lot of times it's labeled as a bad thing. It's just that when there are some dangerous heresies that come about, that's when some type of organization would step in. Now, enough on the religious side of it. Let's talk more about uh, philosophy and its importance. So, yeah, you take the classical approach, you look at the classical philosophers and you expand your mind. Then the next part of it, I think, would be how you interact with those who uh, are not very well educated. So this is very hard in a way because if you're very well educated, you don't want to appear foolish. You don't want to make your education look bad or anything like that. You want to be dignified. Metochites gives us a lot of uh, advice regarding social politics, especially when someone is being rude to you and terrible. So this actually hits home a lot when it comes to what I see a lot of times when I'm going about my day. You see it not only online, which you would expect it online, you see it in person as well, where people treat each other terribly. They brashly uh, deny each other's humanity. They wish death on each other. They even sometimes get into physical altercations with one another. Mitohites actually gives us more advice on how to socially maneuver around these people, um, conquering them not by our anxiety but by our sanity. So if someone's coming in getting all rough against you, you know, kind of seething, wanting to do you harm, Mitsuhite says to conquer them with your sanity. So you would be calm, you'd be polite, you would remind them that they might be embarrassing themselves. Sometimes you might just walk away. These are very simple techniques which one might do. And a lot of this book is about harmony, and there's actually some very funny passages in this book dealing with this very topic. So the former person accordingly lives pleasantly, thinks with kind judgment, and remains moderate as a result of the tranquility of his soul, since he relies on reason, which blows over him like fair and refreshing breezes, as it were. The latter person, on the other hand, is worn away and strangled as soon as he realizes that he is not at all superior to others. He is constantly striving to prevail in whatever he can, but because of his ignorance, he is not even sure who he is or what he's doing. And if later on he might be satisfied with what he has and uses it with more moderation and gentleness, putting an end to his extravagance, he could thus thereafter become a better and agreeable and reasonable man, and could spare himself trouble, and could revere in quiet contemplation the better course of life. So he's very eloquent. He is someone you could actually read his wit in every word. He's very wise, sometimes comical, but in this sense, he's such a good writer. But as you can tell by that particular passage of this text, he actually is showing some hope that, if this person does realize that there's a better way with contemplation, that he could be more agreeable and more eloquent and so on, that he could actually change. So I guess the big thing he's stressing is that our education guides us. And this is something I'm going to not uh, stress enough, that the education guides us into a life of contemplation, but our life of contemplation does not interrupt our life of labor, because it actually benefits our life of labor. In fact, there's actually another book. It's an old British naval book of strategy, which talks about the theories as something that helps make practical stuff much better and much easier to do. That's a paraphrase, but it's the same concept. So you have to think about things before you act, and your contemplation lends to your uh, greatness and your well-being. This is actually also reflected in earlier Byzantine or Eastern Roman texts, such as the Mars Tragicon, which actually recommends that you should think about things then the night before. Then when you do your plan, you just go ahead and get it done immediately. It's the same concept, and that's something we cannot stress enough either. And so that's the thing about philosophy. It's a Game Philosopher. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe.